When I hear people say, the church's got too many rules, I know they're talking about morality, what's right to do and what's wrong to do. Most of the time when people say the church has too many rules, it really comes down to two things that they're talking about. Sex and going to church on Sunday. That's almost completely what everybody's talking about. Sex. Let's get through some of that. We teach that adultery is unacceptable. That Jesus himself said adultery was unacceptable. That the Jewish people were taught that adultery is unacceptable. What's adultery? Having sexual relations or some sort of intimacy with a person who's married to someone else. An extramarital affair. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. 2, fornication. Fornication is the sin of having sexual relations with somebody who is not your spouse, but is not married to somebody else. So you have not gotten married together, but you're already pretending like you're married. You're letting your bodies experience the rights that married couples have, even though you're not married. One of the biggest reasons why we have that rule is because we really want that sex be connected to a deep commitment. And that deep commitment is said publicly, and the community helps you to maintain that unity. If you don't have that level of commitment, giving your body and your sexuality over to somebody, the world knows this now. They're falling deeper and deeper into this pit. It is much more damaging than I was just having fun. That it affects a person's self-image. It affects them sometimes with sickness, but sometimes it affects just the way that they have other relationships with other people. And so it is really meant to be for marriage. Now, when it comes to cohabitation, living together, the church teaches don't do that, but there's a reason we teach that. It's not really a sin in and of itself. The problem is when you're living with each other, especially if you're attracted to each other, then you're in the occasion of sin. You're tempted. You're tempted to have sexual relations with each other. And it tells the rest of the community, nobody sees you behind closed doors. Everybody kind of assumes you're having sex with each other. And for most cases, when they're living together, they are having sexual relations with each other, even though they're not committed in the marriage commitment. So that's why it really has to do with fornication and the public view of it and the temptation to enter into fornication. So that's what that's all about. The purpose of sex is really fourfold. It's pleasurable, so it's something very natural that people find pleasure in. 2, it's meant to bring children into the world. 3, it's meant to increase intimacy in couples. Okay, so it strengthens a love relationship with each other. And 4, it's an honoring and sanctifying of the other person. Okay, if you don't have all 4 of those, then you're doing something wrong. If it's like we're doing a dirty act, a hurtful act, something that's not consensual, something that is not commitment-based, something that is not growing us closer to each other, then it's immoral. Then it's not acceptable. So we don't believe in hurting. We don't believe in degrading. We'd say, what does the church have to say about me in my bedroom? Well, love thyself and love your neighbor as thyself. Okay? Which means you can't take advantage of people like that or let others take advantage of you. So that's the reason behind that. Homosexuality. Homosexuality obviously does not have procreation as part of it, so therefore it's not one of the 4 goods. I can understand very much loving each other. I can understand looking for physical pleasure. I can understand looking for a sense that we're growing in our relationship with each other. However, it doesn't need to be sexual. If we take that part out of it, yeah, you do lose the pleasure, the personal pleasures part. You do lose that. But since there is no possibility of procreation, the church says, no, this is not what sex is about. This is, you can love each other. You can be loving to each other. You can be committed to each other. but it's not a marriage, because marriage has a lot to do with having children, and it has a lot to do with modeling other marriages which are designed for having children. And so the fact that homosexuality is not procreative is a big reason. Now, there's other reasons why homosexuality has run into problems in our culture. A lot of people, because it's not, that homosexuality is not procreative, you can't have children, there are a lot of people who then become promiscuous. And there's a lot of self-degradation. And there's a lot of times in which there's alcohol and drugs involved that really hurt somebody's dignity, and a lot of being taken advantage of. It's not in all cases. I think a lot of times our culture likes to put up that perfect couple and say that's what we're talking about. But that's not what the statistics are showing. They're just showing that there's a lot of people being taken advantage of in those circles. And so all of that is just part of it. It's like, I kind of think of it as once you've taken the step to say, I don't trust the church's teaching on this, you kind of enter into a room filled with almost anything goes. And there's a lot of pain that goes along with that. And we'd like to see people avoid that. Transgenderism, that's a big one right now. We don't believe that God made a mistake when he made you. If he made you a man and you had feminine characteristics, so you're a man with feminine characteristics, doesn't mean that you should be dressing up or doing surgeries to fix that. It does mean that you do need support. Sometimes it's your environment that created it. Sometimes it's biological. Or a woman who thinks that they're a man. But it's not really something we want to just say anything goes. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. And their bodies are made the way that God intended them to be made. And they're able to have children, but only with the opposite sex. So the opposite gender. So to a Catholic perspective, any attempt to change all that is really trying to say that God made a mistake, and we're trying to fix God's mistake. And I don't believe that God did make a mistake. Abortion, people use abortion a lot of times because they use it almost like a contraception, even though it's after conception. So they just basically don't want the responsibility of a child. Now, there might be some very good reasons why they don't. They might not economically want that. They might not be in a stable relationship, maybe even an abusive relationship. And so it's not a good environment to have a child. And so certainly we don't want that. So step one is we want to avoid fornication or adultery or abuse or rape or any of those things. We do not want people to be taken advantage of. So that's step one. Step two is if they are pregnant, we need to take care of them because a lot of times they don't feel the support from the normal networks. And so we are not called to be judgmental and shame them, but to help them in all ways that we can in preparation for them giving birth, medically, financially, emotionally. Now, finally, sometimes it's true the child needs to go up for adoption, or that the mother is going to be a single mother and is going to need a significant amount of support. And so we need to be there for them. I suppose because all of those situations require so much sacrifice, the potential sacrifice of physical health, the sacrifice of other futures, development, schooling, that a lot of people say in order to avoid the consequences of having a child in the world, we legitimize abortion. The church says no. The two don't match each other. Though those consequences are very real and very serious, life-changing consequences, ending the life of a person is not respecting the dignity of the person. We'll say, well, no, it's not a person, it's a fetus. Well, for the church, it's very clear to us that that fetus, and science supports us on this, that fetus is an individual human being. And lots of arguments go back and forth about that, but that's what it really comes down to, is we believe that's a true human being, and therefore worthy of respect and not to be killed. Sterilization, a lot of couples, they get to the point where they don't want to have any more children or even, find it risky to get pregnant. But we do believe that it is better to use the natural family planning to the best of your ability. This is when it gets really, sterilization should not be the quick fix answer. I'll just do this, and then we can have as much sex as we want without worrying about kids. we have found that statistically speaking, it leads to some sort of degradation of the act of intimacy. So it doesn't bond the couple as much as before because it becomes almost inconsequential, which was the intention. I don't want consequences of pregnancy, but it becomes inconsequential. It's not so special. At least that's what the stats are showing. It also sometimes leads to infidelities, and it leads to sometimes feeling bad about oneself as a man or a woman. Somehow they've taken what was healthy and made it no longer functioning on purpose. And so there's complications there. Again, that one in particular, work very closely with your priest, with those who are doctors, medical, because of the nature of it. That might need further conversation to make the best choice possible, but the choice will be yours because of the law of the rule of subsidiarity, the principle of subsidiarity. The decision is yours, but we need to develop your conscience. What's the right way to do that? And that one in particular is it seems like black and white, but it can be difficult. Artificial contraception, that is not something we do. Kind of along the same lines, you're prohibiting the normal natural function. A lot of times artificial contraception was meant so that couples could have sexual relations without the consequence of pregnancy. I don't like to think of pregnancy as a consequence. And I also don't know that that leads to better marriages. It seems that it ends up being people who are not ready to commit to each other are using that so that they can get the pleasure without the responsibility. And that's when it comes really complicated. They might say, well, we really love each other, but I don't know if this love will last. So they have an immature love, and they want to just enjoy each other while they can, or hopefully build into a serious love. But it's better if you have a serious love and then enter into intimacy. So the church's teaching is artificial contraception is not acceptable. Natural family planning is much better, and you can ask your classes about that. So that's sexuality in a nutshell. And yeah, it seems like there's a lot of rules. It's just a different context of the same basic rules.